Chris here, and welcome back to another video on the Mi 11 Lite here. So I have posted in the channel, you can check that out, my full in-depth review. But this is a focus more on what you can expect exactly out of the cameras of the Mi 11 Lite. So we have a main 64 megapixel sensor with an f1.79 aperture and an 8 megapixel ultra-wide 5 megapixel macro camera. The selfie camera on this one is 16 megapixels. So I'm going to show you some samples, get into a little bit of detail about the audio bit rates. We'll take a look at low light performances, the night mode, portrait, pretty much everything. So you know exactly what to expect out of the cameras here in the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite. And a brief look now at the camera application before I show you those samples. So with our photo mode here, shutter rate, very quick, 64 megapixel main camera at the moment. We have 2 times digital zoom, and I wouldn't really go above that. Now you can, by just holding, you can force it to go up to 10 times, which does look like a washed out oil painting. And then our ultra wide, this is 8 megapixels. Shutter rate throughout is the same. It is very, very quick. AI mode's on the left, HDR mode is on auto. We'll leave it on auto for the purposes of this video. Portrait mode, so you can adjust here the background blur. So as low as F1 right up to F16, which is, well, basically no blur at all there. Beautifying, I have this off for the purposes of the samples I am showing you, as I find it just smooths out the skin a little too much. But some people do like that. Under more, you get various other different options here. So 64 megapixel mode, that is there. Higher file size and more detailed photo as a result. Got vlog mode there, short video, long exposure, movie effects, clone mode, and then having a look at our video mode. So ultra wide video, that's 1080p maximum. We get electronic image stabilization on the main camera up to 4K 30. For 1080p 60 doesn't have any electronic image stabilization, unfortunately. Movie frame mode settings, macro camera you can swap over to the 5 megapixel macro, and that will be for video there. And then the Pro mode, this one is very interesting to me. We have a lot of different options in here. So the white balance, focus, shutter rate, ISO. So this goes up to 6,400. The shutter rate up to 30 seconds. You can choose over the 3 lenses. You can select those there. 64 megapixel mode. And we do have RAW too there. And with the Pro mode, that also works in videos. You can tap and hold to lock your exposure and your focus. Let's have a look at some samples now. So with the front-facing camera, the 16 megapixel one, we can only shoot 1080p 30 with electronic image stabilization. As I walk around, you can see it does not shake around too much. It seems quite steady. Now the crop is not too bad. I can hold my hand and extend it out a little bit more, as you can see now. Now if you decide to use, with the front-facing camera, 1080p 60 frames per second, it does not have electronic image stabilization, which is a real shame. Audio bitrate is only 96 kilobits per second too, which is rather poor. It's on the low side. 4K now, so with the main camera of course, it's only 4K 30, we cannot do 4K 60 unfortunately with the Mi 11 Lite. Now it has electronic image stabilization, as you see I walk ahead, it's relatively steady, it is not the best I have seen. Now when you pan around, depending on the exposure changes, you do get a little bit of notice of judder come through, but it's not as bad as some of the phones I have seen recently, like the K40 Pro, which can have quite a bit of judder. Ultra wide footage, so this has electronic image stabilization, 1080p 30 only with this, and we cannot shoot 4K, that means. And you cannot swap over to any of the other cameras once you start recording too with this. So a short jog ahead, testing that electronic image stabilization. It's not too bad, but I do find the quality of the ultra wide, especially for video, quite a bit washed out, and it's not a patch near as good as what we get with the main camera. This is 1080p 60. Now 60 frames per second does not have any electronic image stabilization. Even though my timeline's in 30, this is just to show you that you're not going to get the electronic image stabilization 1080p 60, sadly. A little bit of low light video now. So these conditions are very difficult. You can see that the electronic image stabilization does not look as good, and that's to be expected. It's only a little tiny sensor, remember, and this one does not have any optical image stabilization. As I pan around, it doesn't look too smooth there, but I mean this quality is okay, and it's relatively well lit where I am with these yellow lights we have here in Europe. It's alright, the front-facing camera, because I've got a little bit of light, but when you get into darker patches, you can see now there is some grain coming through. This is to be expected, of course, because it is, well, very difficult for any phone these kind of conditions right now. Okay, so my thoughts now on the camera performance. So the audio bit rate for video, definitely a bit of a disappointment. I hope that Xiaomi changes their policy of using these lower bit rates on their more low-end or mid-range phones, not to compete with the flagships, which now all have 320 kilobits per second with the audio, and it doesn't sound as scratchy, it sounds so much better there. Sadly, the 1080p footage at 60 frames per second, both front-facing camera and rear, doesn't have any electronic image stabilization. Now, this chipset has enough power to be able to do that, so I hope with a firmware update that they will be able to fix and correct that. The low light performance out of the camera, so when you're taking some night shots, if you've got subjects that are moving about, expect that to be a little bit blurry there, but when you're taking photos of scenery like I showed you with the hotel and in the street and things, it's not actually too bad at all considering the spec of this phone, the category and the price of it. I think it does all right there. Portrait photos, the stitching isn't too bad around the edges. I have certainly seen a lot worse. And then the overall daytime stills, they look pretty good. So the cameras, I think, aren't bad at all, but there is a weak spot with this particular setup. And that's the 8 megapixel ultra wide for me is not so great. So I really would have preferred them to have gone with, say, a 13 megapixel ultra wide. And if you give it autofocus, then that could also double as our macro. The macro shots look pretty good. It's just the ultra wide, especially for video, is a little grainy, a little blurry, a lot of edge blurring as well there that is coming through. And the selfie camera, it's not too bad. It's all right, the 1080p vlog quality and the selfie shots I think look good. The stitching again seems to be pretty good. So all up, I think as a package here for what you're getting, is it better than, say, the Redmi Note 10 Pro? I think the main camera certainly isn't. The main camera on that one is better. You get a faster 120 Hz screen. So it's another option out there. And you've got other phones from Xiaomi too, like, well, slightly older ones, the Mi Note 10 Pro, also with a 108 megapixel sensor. So there's plenty of options out there. And if you want the absolute best, then of course, you go for their new Mi 11 Ultra. It's an expensive phone, but that one is a camera monster with a periscope, the ultra wide, and the main camera there just being, of course, so much better than what we have on offer here. So thank you so much for watching this, well, more of an in-depth look, a camera review, you could say, of the Mi 11 Lite, I was going to say Ultra. And make sure you do check out in the channel my full review of this one and the other reviews, and there will probably be a camera review coming up too of the Mi 11 Ultra when I finally get hold of it.